The war had ended, but Westeros was not the same anymore. King's Landing smelled of burnt stone and dead dreams. Smoke still rose from the Red Keep's ruins, and silence haunted the once busy streets. The Iron Throne, melted by dragonfire, was now just a twisted memory. The people were lost, without rulers, without food, without hope. But in the middle of all this pain, something unexpected happened. A raven flew north, carrying a message that would change everything. It was from Robert Baratheon, who was believed to be long dead. He had survived, hidden away in the Stormlands, nursing old wounds and regrets. And now, with the realm in ruin, he wanted to make amends. The letter reached Winterfell, where Jon Snow had just returned after laying Queen Daenerys to rest. His heart was heavy with guilt, but he still carried that deep sense of duty that had always guided him. When he read Robert's message, he didn't hesitate. "We've spilled too much blood," it said. "Let's build something worth bleeding for." Robb Stark, Jon's half-brother, or so he once thought, had also survived the Red Wedding. With the help of a few loyal bannermen and a secret maester, he had faked his death. Now older, scarred and wiser, Robb ruled the North from the shadows, waiting for the right time to return. And finally, from a quiet corner of the Vale, came the man everyone thought lost to honor, Ned Stark, saved by Howland Reed from the execution block. Ned had hidden for years, watching Westeros burn from afar. Now, tired of hiding and haunted by the lives lost, he was ready to face the world again. The four of them, Robert, Ned, Robb and Jon, met in a ruined inn halfway between King's Landing and Riverrun. They didn't talk much at first, just sat there, looking at each other with the weight of their shared history in the silence. Robert, fatter and older, with a limp from a deep wound, broke the silence with a laugh. "Who'd have thought we'd meet again, without swords in our hands or wine in our bellies?" Ned didn't laugh. "We've lost too much, Robert." "I know," Robert said softly. "But that's why we're here." They laid out a plan. No more Iron Throne, no more mad queens or cruel kings. Westeros needed something new, not ruled by fear or dragons, but by unity. A council of leaders from each region. A realm led not by one, but by many. Robb would return to the North, no longer as a king, but as a warden and voice of the North in the new council. Jon, though reluctant, would be the bridge between the free folk and the South, bringing peace to the people beyond the Wall. Robert would use what remained of his name and power to rally the Stormlands and the Reach, while Ned would serve as the guide, the quiet hand behind the council, using his honor to bind them all together. But rebuilding wasn't going to be easy. The Lannisters were still alive, some hiding, some plotting. The Iron Islands were restless, and many noble houses didn't trust this new council idea. Old grudges and fresh wounds were everywhere, and deeper still, each of the four men carried their own ghosts. Jon couldn't forget Daenerys' eyes when he stabbed her. Robb still dreamt of Talisa's bloody body. Robert drank less, but his heart was still broken over Lyanna. And Ned. Ned had secrets he still hadn't told, especially to Jon, but they had one thing in common: regret. And now, maybe, just maybe, they could use that to build something better. As they raised their cups in that ruined inn, with ashes on the floor and wind blowing through broken walls, they didn't toast to kings or thrones. They toasted to the people, to the living, to peace. But peace doesn't come easy in Westeros. And for every step forward they would take, there were shadows waiting to pull them back. The road to peace was bloodier than the war itself. A few weeks after the secret meeting, the four wolves, Robert, Ned, Robb and Jon, began putting their plans into motion. Letters were sent to every corner of Westeros. Some went with hopeful words, others carried warnings. The message was clear: the era of kings was over, but Westeros wasn't ready to listen. In King's Landing, the rubble barely cooled when Sir Tyrek Lannister, a surviving cousin of Cersei, declared himself protector of the realm. He set up court inside a broken tower, wearing a crown of rusted gold and surrounded by cutthroats. He promised revenge against traitors and wolves dressed as sheep. His words spread fast, poisoning ears from the Westerlands to the Riverlands. Robert Baratheon rode to the Stormlands. His old home, now fractured into smaller factions led by power-hungry lords. His old name still carried weight, but not as much as it once did. Some welcomed him back with open arms. Others saw him as a drunk relic of a failed crown. At Storm's End, he stood before a crowd of bannermen and said, "I failed you once. I drank while the realm burned. I trusted the wrong people. But now I see clearly, we don't need a king. We need peace. And if that means I give my life again, so be it." It was the first time Robert Baratheon spoke not like a king, but like a man. And the men listened. Meanwhile, in the north, Robb Stark revealed himself again to his people. The reaction was a storm of emotion. Some cried with joy. Others questioned the truth. How could the young wolf have survived the Red Wedding? Robb knelt before the great hall in Winterfell and addressed his bannermen. "They stabbed me through the heart, not with blades, but with betrayal. And I lived. I lived to fix what we all broke. I am no king now. I am your servant. The North will speak, not with swords, but with wisdom." The lords of the North roared in approval, but some, like House Karstark, still carried deep wounds. Robb knew trust wouldn't return overnight, but it had begun. Far beyond the wall, Jon Snow walked through the snow-covered wilds, his sword strapped to his side, Ghost at his heels. The free folk welcomed him like a brother. Tormund gave him a bear hug that nearly crushed his ribs. "You've come back, Crow," Tormund grinned. "Was the South too hot for you?" Jon didn't smile much anymore. He had seen too much, lost too much. But he told the free folk what they needed to hear. "You are free. You always were. But we don't have to be enemies with the South anymore. There's a chance, just a small one, that we can live without war," Tormund chuckled. "If anyone else said that, I'd laugh in their face. But you, Jon Snow, you're more fool than man. And I like that." Back in the Vale, Ned Stark worked in the shadows. He knew Westeros better than any of them. He had lived through 2 rebellions, served 2 kings, and lost his head, or almost did, for speaking the truth. With the help of Howland Reed and a few trusted maesters, he began forming the backbone of the new council. Every region would send one voice. One vote: North, Stormlands, Riverlands, Vale, Dorne, Iron Islands, and even the Free Folk. A round table would replace the Iron Throne. There would be no ruler, only leaders, but their movement sparked fear in many corners. In the Westerlands, House Lannister regrouped under Ser Tyrek's rule. They began hiring mercenaries from Essos, gold still flowing from the deep mines. In Old Town, the High Septons debated whether a council without divine right was a sin against the Seven. And in the Iron Islands, Yara Greyjoy warned that her people would never bend the knee to a talking table. And then there were whispers, strange ones, of a shadow moving through the Riverlands, a faceless man with no name, killing lords who supported the council. A warning left at each scene: only fire can rule. Some believed it was a leftover supporter of Daenerys. Others whispered darker things, that magic had not left Westeros after the dragons, that something was still burning beneath the surface, waiting. Back at Winterfell, the 4 met again, this time with others from across the realm. The first council was held not in King's Landing, but in the snowy halls of the North. Tension filled the room. Robb spoke calmly. Robert growled through his anger. Jon stayed silent mostly, and Ned kept watching everyone like a wolf watching a pack. They argued, shouted, debated whether the council should have the power to raise armies, how taxes would work, who would judge criminals. But for the first time in decades, Westeros was not ruled by one voice. And for a single night, peace didn't seem like a dream. It felt real. As they walked outside, snow falling lightly, Jon turned to Robb. "Do you think this will work?" Robb looked up at the grey sky. "Not today, not tomorrow, but maybe one day. If we don't kill each other first," Jon almost smiled. "Aye, that's the hard part." But as they walked back inside, a rider came through the gates covered in blood. He dropped from his horse, barely breathing. In his hand was a piece of blackened cloth, marked with a lion, and he whispered, "They're coming, for all of you." The rider died before dawn. Maester Luwin, now older and slower but still sharp as ever, examined the blood-soaked body with tired eyes. Blade through the gut, not clean. Meant to make him suffer, he muttered. The blackened cloth in the rider's hand was unmistakable. Golden Lion scorched. Lannister Ned Stark stood over the corpse, face grim. A message, he said. Not just war. A warning. Robb clenched his fists. They want to drag us back into blood and fire. Just when we've begun to breathe. They never stopped planning, Jon added, stepping beside him. We were fools to think they'd just let this council take root. Robert Baratheon, who had been quiet since the rider arrived, finally spoke. Tyrek Lannister's a coward, but not stupid. He knows he can't win with words, so he sends blades instead. His voice dropped cold and bitter. We should have crushed them when we had the chance. We're not kings anymore, Robert, Ned reminded him. That's what this was supposed to be about. A better way, Robert scoffed. And how many corpses before that better way arrives? The argument returned louder this time. The small council of bannermen gathered in the Winterfell hall watched their leaders shout again. The dream of unity was strong, but the reality of old grudges and new threats was even stronger. Robb finally slammed his hand on the table. Enough, we all want peace. But if Tyrek marches with swords, we'll have to answer with steel. Ned frowned, but he said nothing. Even he knew the truth. Westeros wouldn't change without one last fire. Within the week, ravens were sent. Not to demand war, but to prepare for defense. The message was clear. If you stand for peace, you must be ready to fight for it. Meanwhile, in the Westerlands, Tyrek Lannister was already moving. His forces, backed by mercenaries from across the narrow sea, had seized control of the Golden Tooth and parts of the Riverlands. He promised to restore order to the realm. In truth, he wanted the crown, any crown. King Lord Regent, it didn't matter. He just wanted power. He also wasn't alone. Ironwood men from Dorne had begun pushing north, quietly, some under Lannister gold, others with grudges of their own. In the Reach, some ambitious lords whispered behind closed doors, unhappy with this council rule, hungry for titles lost. And in the shadows, assassins kept moving. Lords who supported the council were found dead in their beds. Some were poisoned, others vanished. But what truly shook the realm came from the Riverlands. A town near Harrenhal burned overnight, no survivors. When scouts arrived days later, they found the walls blackened by something unnatural. Not wildfire, not dragon flame, something colder, older. A sigil was left behind, burned into the stone. A wolf, bleeding. Back in Winterfell, Jon stood on the battlements with Ghost beside him. Snow fell quietly, but his thoughts were loud. They're trying to turn the people against us, he said. They want the world to fear wolves again. Ned joined him, cloaked in furs, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, they'll do worse than that. Tyrek knows how to win a war he can't fight. Lies, fear, chaos. He'll let the realm tear itself apart, then sit on the ashes. Jon looked at him. And what do we do? Ned looked out at the snow-covered land, voice steady. We show them we're not the same. We don't kill without reason. We don't rule through fear, but we don't let them take what we've built. The preparations began. Robb marched south with a northern host, not to conquer, but to hold the Riverlands before Tyrek could take more. Robert headed to Storm's End, rallying loyal lords to block the Reach from rising against them. Jon went north again, forming a free folk guard to protect the Wall and the Vale's eastern edge. And Ned remained in Winterfell, turning it into the heart of the new realm, not a castle, but a beacon. But something else began spreading too. Hope. For every noble who betrayed them, 3 common folk rose in support. Farmers, traders, smiths, they weren't loyal to thrones or bloodlines. They were loyal to the idea of peace, of leaders who listened, of sons not sent to war for pride. A woman in the Riverlands wrote a song about the 4 wolves who stood between fire and ruin. It spread like wildfire, even in the shadows. Still, darker things brewed beneath the surface. In the far south, a rider brought news to Tyrek. The Faceless One moves again. Another lord dead, Tyrek grinned. Good. Keep the fear growing. But in a dark corner of the same camp, a whisper passed from one spy to another. The wolf's blood runs deeper than we thought. The bastard knows something. Something even his father won't say. And far in the north, beneath a frozen cave, something ancient stirred. Something not dead, not quite. Drawn by the scent of power and the crack in Westeros's fragile peace, the real war was coming. And this time, swords might not be enough. The sky over Westeros had turned a shade darker. It wasn't the war. Not yet. But there was something in the wind now, colder than the north, heavier than war drums. The land itself felt uneasy, as if it knew that peace was not meant to last here. In the Riverlands, Robb Stark marched with his northern bannermen, banners flying high with the direwolf sigil. Villages along the way welcomed him not with cheers, but with silence. Burned homes, empty wells. The Lannisters had passed through here already. And not just with swords. Robb stopped at a small holdfast called Green Hollow, a place that once fed hundreds with its rich fields. Now nothing remained but ash. Men, women, children, all gone. No sign of battle. No blood, just vanished. As he stood among the ruins, a boy approached him, barely 10, filthy, eyes wide with something older than fear. They came in the night, the boy whispered. But they weren't men. Robb knelt. Who, lad? Who came? The boy looked past him as if speaking to ghosts. They didn't speak, just stared. Faces like shadows. They touched people and they stopped moving. Robb's blood ran cold. This wasn't Lannister work. That night he wrote to Ned and Jon. The letter was short. There's something else out here. It's not Tyrek, not man. We need answers, fast. In Winterfell, Ned Stark read the message 3 times. Each word echoed louder than the last. He knew Robb wasn't a boy who jumped at shadows. If his son feared something, it meant something real. And real in Westeros never meant safe. He called for Maester Luwin and Howland Reed, who had remained in the north ever since Ned revealed he was alive. They sat in the great hall under torchlight, the air thick with unease. There were tales, Howland said slowly, from before the wall, of something buried beneath the rivers. Old gods that never left. Forgotten things, Ned frowned. Tales, not truths. Howland looked him in the eye. Tales are born from truths, Ned. You know that better than most. Maester Luwin added, the Citadel banned certain scrolls. Ones that spoke of the faceless ones who drank fire and wore the night. They were dismissed as madness. But I've read them. What Robb describes. It fits. Ned stood up, his voice sharp. We're already fighting the Lannisters. We can't afford another enemy. Maybe we don't get to choose, Howland said, far north. Jon Snow rode hard through the white silence beyond the wall. Tormund rode beside him, face stern, eyes alert, got a bad feeling. Snow, Tormund muttered. The cold ain't normal. Something's wrong. Jon had felt it too. The snow didn't fall like it used to. It seemed still, as if the wind itself was afraid to move. The free folk had been reporting strange sightings, shadows moving across the hills, animals dead without wounds, and a sound in the night like whispering stone. Then they found it, a cave deep in the ice. Ghost growled as they neared, refusing to go further. Inside, walls were lined with strange markings, ancient, twisted carvings Jon had never seen. And in the center, a pile of bones, human, dozens, arranged in a circle, as if worshipping something that wasn't there anymore. At the top of the pile was a single item, a golden lion brooch covered in frost. Jon stared at it. What the hell is going on? That night he sent his own raven. To Ned, to Robb, to Robert. There's something buried beneath the north. I don't think the war is just about power anymore. Meanwhile, Robert Baratheon stood at Storm's End, yelling at a dozen lords who refused to agree on anything. Peace, he shouted. Is that a word none of you Southron fools understand? Lord Penrose muttered, your council wants to destroy the old ways. The throne, the gods? You ask too much. Robert grabbed him by the collar. I ask for your sons not to die in another pointless war. But in the back of the room, Sir Davos Seaworth stepped forward, holding a scroll. My lord, Davos said. This just arrived. From the north, Robert opened it. As he read, his face changed, not anger this time, but something that looked a lot like fear. Jon's words chilled him more than any cold wind. "They're waking," Robert whispered. In the Riverlands, Tyrek Lannister sat in his stolen hall at Harrenhal, smug and confident. His mercenaries guarded the walls. His allies sent gold. And soon he would make his move on King's Landing, rebuild it and crown himself. But that night, something slipped past his guards. A figure in black entered his chamber, face hidden. No words, just a knife, curved, ancient, gleaming with a lightless glow. Tyrek reached for his sword, but he never even saw the blade coming. As he fell, blood pouring down his gold-stitched robes, the killer leaned close and whispered a name, Valir, and then vanished into shadow. Back in Winterfell, Ned received the Raven that same night. Tyrek Lannister was dead, not in battle, not by rebellion, but by a ghost. He looked to the fire. The world was no longer in their hands. Now something older held the realm's future, and they had only just begun to stir. The flames in Winterfell's great hearth danced violently, though no wind blew. Ned Stark stood alone in the hall, Tyrek Lannister's death letter clenched in his hand. The words didn't feel like victory. Not this time. Tyrek had been a monster in the making, but someone else had killed him, and not for justice. There was no signature, no sigil, no claim. Just silence. Jon's raven from the far north. Robb's warning from the Riverlands. Now this someone, or something, was hunting in the shadows of Westeros. And it didn't care who ruled. Ned turned as the doors creaked open. Maester Luwin entered slowly, carrying a scroll bound with black wax. "This came just after sunset, my lord. No sigil, no name, but it's not like the others." Ned unrolled the parchment. The handwriting was elegant but strange, letters shaped like curves of steel. The message was short. Peace is a lie. The old gods remember. The fire must return. Beneath it a single mark, a burning tree. Ned looked to the hearth. "What in the seven hells is coming for us?" Far across the snows, Jon Snow returned to Castle Black with Tormund and a dozen free folk scouts. Their faces were pale, haunted. The cave with the lion brooch had only been the beginning. Deeper into the Frostfangs they had found more symbols, circles of bones, sigils carved into the ice, but no footsteps, no signs of life, as if death had left its mark and vanished into thin air. Inside Castle Black, Jon met with Val, the wildling princess. She was one of the few who knew the old stories, really knew them. Not the watered-down tales of maesters, but the raw, terrifying truths whispered by fires in the far wild. "You've seen it too," she said quietly, pouring hot water over bitter herbs. "The signs, the bones, the stillness," Jon nodded. "I thought the Night King was the last of it, that we ended it." Val met his eyes. "You killed him." "But not the darkness." Jon drank in silence, thinking. "Then what is it? What's coming?" Val leaned in. "Before the long night, the world burned, not with dragons, with hollow fire. It took no shape, no face. It lived in men, and it used their hunger. It wants to rule, not with thrones, with fear." Jon's voice turned sharp. "Is it magic?" "No," she whispered. "It's memory, hate older than names. And it never forgets." Jon stood. "Then we need to remind it who we are." Robb Stark, camped outside Riverrun, stared across the mist-covered river. His scouts had not returned. 3 sent south, none had come back. The villagers still vanished, without a trace. They weren't losing a war. They were being swallowed. That night, 1 scout did return. But what arrived wasn't a man. It was a husk. His eyes were wide, mouth open, skin drained of color. He collapsed at Robb's feet, twitching, a torn scrap of parchment clutched in his fist. Robb unfolded it, hand trembling. The same mark, a burning tree beside it written in blood. "One wolf must burn, or they all fall." The meaning was clear and deeply personal. Storm's End was restless. Robert Baratheon sat in the war room with Ser Davos, maps sprawled out across the table. But even now, with the Lannisters falling and allies gathering, he couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off. Then the news arrived. Tyrek, dead. No killer, no witness. The Lannister forces had begun fracturing, but none dared move forward. A shadow had entered the game, and nobody knew who it played for. Robert slammed his fist on the table. "I'm too old for ghost stories, Davos." Davos, calm and steady as always, replied, "They're not stories if they're killing men, my lord." Robert rubbed his face. "We started this to rebuild, to fix the mess we made. But the realm bleeds from a wound we don't understand." Davos leaned in. "Then maybe it's time to ask someone who does." Robert narrowed his eyes. "Who?" "Melisandre." By the next sunrise, 4 letters were sent, each carried by a trusted rider. One to Jon, one to Robb, one to Ned, and one to a place no man dared enter freely anymore. Dragonstone. There, in a tower lit by red flame, Melisandre waited. She had seen it in her fires, wolves in a storm of ash, a bleeding tree on fire, a dark mouth opening in the ground of Westeros. She smiled. "Finally," she whispered to the flames. "They see it too." Back in Winterfell, Ned gathered his ravens. "Send word," he ordered. All of them. To the Vale, to Dorne, to anyone still listening, Maester Luwin hesitated. "What do we say?" Ned's eyes were colder than the snow outside. "Tell them the war we thought we finished has just begun." The snow no longer melted, even in the southern valleys. From dawn to the neck, the weather had changed. Subtle at first, but undeniable. Cold winds carried whispers, and the birds stopped singing in the forests. Storms came without thunder. Rain fell like ash. The very bones of Westeros were shifting, and still the burning tree appeared on doorsteps, etched into stone, carved into the bark of ancient weirwoods. Always the same message near it, always the same voice behind the silence. One wolf must burn. Jon Snow arrived at Winterfell just past midnight. His cloak was torn, his face pale from the ride. Ghost limped behind him with a gash across his leg. Robb and Ned met him in the courtyard, both armed, not with steel, but with dread. Jon dismounted without a word and handed Ned a scroll. Ned read it under torchlight. Then again. "They're marking us," Jon said, voice hoarse. "The wolves, the council, the free folk, everyone who stands for this new order. They're being hunted. What do they want?" Robb asked. Jon looked at him darkly. "To undo it all. Not just our peace, us, personally, you, me, father." He looked at Ned with guilt hidden beneath calm. "Someone out there knows our blood is the spine of this realm. They think if one of us dies, the rest will fall." Ned's voice was grim. "They're not entirely wrong." At the same hour, Robert Baratheon arrived on the shores of Dragonstone. Melisandre waited for him at the gates, her red robes fluttering like embers in the sea wind. She looked no older, no colder, as if the strange chill sweeping across Westeros dared not touch her. "You finally believe," she said. Robert dismounted heavily. "I believe something foul walks this realm. If you're behind it, I'll burn this damn rock with you on it." Melisandre only smiled. "The fire is not mine, Robert, but it is awake. You and the wolves have lit it. All of you, playing gods, rewriting kingdoms. Peace offends the old blood. What is this burning tree?" He barked. She looked toward the volcano. "It's not a tree. It's a memory, a curse, planted in the time before thrones, when fire lived beneath the roots of the world. You're not at war with men. You're at war with the past itself." Robert frowned. "Then let the past come. I've killed kings and monsters. I'll kill ghosts too." Melisandre's voice dropped. "It doesn't want to fight. It wants to unmake." Back in Winterfell, the council met in the great hall, Ned at the head, Jon and Robb to his right, a few lords and free folk leaders on the left. The hall was quieter than usual. Even the torches flickered slower. Robb opened the map. Dozens of markings. Burning trees spotted across the realm. Disappearances. Towns emptied without violence. Children dreaming of things they couldn't describe. "This isn't just rebellion anymore," he said. "It's infestation." Jon nodded. "We need to think like we're at war with something that doesn't bleed," one of the Vale Lords scoffed. "What are we even fighting? Dreams, ghosts, painted trees." Jon stared at him. "You think we're making this up?" "Men have always seen demons in smoke when they fear change," the Lord said. "This council, this peace, it makes enemies. But they bleed like us. Then the hall doors creaked open. Maester Lewin rushed in. A raven, urgent, from Riverrun. He handed Ned the scroll. Ned read it once, his jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened. Then he read it aloud. Lady Catelyn Stark has vanished. Her guards are dead, bloodless. No signs of struggle, no ransom. Only this carved into her bedpost: the Wolf Mother burns next. The silence after that was deeper than death. Robb froze. No, Ned stood. I'm going south. No, Jon said quickly. They want one of us alone, Robb snapped. Then I'll go. No one goes alone, Ned interrupted. We ride together. Wolves don't scatter when hunted. A day later, a host departed Winterfell. Ned, Jon, Robb, and 100 hand-picked warriors. The banners bore no crowns, only the stark sigil, old and grey as the land they crossed. As they rode south, villagers whispered behind doors. Some cried, some prayed, some packed and fled, heading toward the sea as if they knew a storm was coming. And in the woods, the trees began to bleed. Saps turned red, leaves shriveled in the middle of autumn. And sometimes at night, the riders swore they heard chanting in languages not spoken for 1,000 years. In the ruins of Harrenhal, far from any living soul, a figure in black robes walked through the ash. It touched the stones with bare hands, whispering softly. Behind it trailed 2 shadows, not men, not beasts. The figure reached into its cloak and pulled out a lock of auburn hair. Lady Catelyn's. It cast the hair into the wind, and the ground beneath Harrenhal trembled. Westeros did not yet know it. But it stood on the edge of something far worse than civil war. The wolves rode south, and the fire behind the tree was about to wake. The land south of Winterfell changed as the wolves rode through it. What was once golden fields and green forests had turned grey, lifeless, quiet, strange. Birds no longer flew overhead. Even the crows, those scavengers of war, were gone. Trees leaned unnaturally, their branches twisted like claws. The deeper Ned, Jon, and Robb rode into the heart of Westeros, the more it felt like the land itself was holding its breath. At night, their campfires flickered blue, not orange. No matter how much wood they used, the flames burned cold. Jon stood guard at the edge of the camp, Ghost curled beside him, still limping. His sword rested across his knees. He hadn't slept in 2 days, not because of fear, but because of the dreams, the same one over and over, a burning tree in the middle of a dead field. Catelyn Stark kneeling before it, her eyes closed, lips moving like prayer. Behind her, shadows with no shape watched. Then her body collapsed into ash, and the tree whispered, "One wolf must burn." Robb approached from behind, his armor half on, hair damp from sweat. "You saw it again, didn't you?" Jon nodded slowly. "It's not just a dream. I can feel it. It's showing us something." Robb looked up at the pale moon. "I don't care what it is. If they've taken my mother, I'll burn every cursed grove in Westeros to the ground until I get her back." Jon stood. "We might not be fighting men anymore, Robb. I've seen a lot of evil. But this wants something deeper. It feeds on fear, on bloodlines." Robb's face hardened. "Then we stop being afraid." 3 days later, they reached the outskirts of Riverrun. But it wasn't Riverrun anymore. The river had dried. The castle walls were blackened, not from fire, but from rot. The stone itself had cracked, bleeding a thick black sap. No birds, no guards, just silence and something else in the air, something that pressed against their skin like unseen fingers. Ned Stark dismounted first, his eyes sweeping the abandoned fortress. "It's not just abandoned, it's dead." Jon moved beside him. "There's something inside." "I can feel it watching." Robb unsheathed his sword. "Then let it see this." They crossed the drawbridge, slow and steady. Inside, everything was untouched. No bodies, no blood, no signs of a fight. But every portrait had been defaced. The Tully banners shredded. On every wall, the same burning tree had been carved deep into the stone, as if someone had clawed it in with their bare hands. Then they heard it. A whisper. Soft. Broken. "Ned." All three turned at once. From the great hall's doorway stood Lady Catelyn, or something that looked like her. Her skin was pale, lips purple, veins visible like black threads beneath her flesh. But her eyes, those motherly, stern, protective eyes, were still hers. Full of sorrow, Robb stepped forward. "Mother?" She didn't speak, just shook her head, trembling. Ned approached slowly, hand on his sword. "Cat, what did they do to you?" She opened her mouth, and a voice that wasn't hers answered, low, echoing. She burned for peace. But peace is not the way. Jon raised his sword. "Get behind us, Robb!" But Catelyn, the thing wearing her skin, suddenly screamed, not from her mouth. From everywhere, the walls vibrated. The torches went out. The ground cracked. Then the shadows came crawling down the walls. Not men, not wights. Worse, they had no form. Just darkness shaped like people, bleeding into the stone. Reaching, the three wolves stood back to back in the hall. "Whatever happens," Ned said, drawing ice, "you do not let this place take you." Robb roared as one of the shadows lunged. He cut it clean, but his blade passed through like mist. Jon slashed with Longclaw, the Valyrian steel burning faintly, and the shadow screamed as if burned. "They hate this steel," Jon shouted. "Only Valyrian blades hurt them." But Ned didn't have one. His sword, ice, had been melted down years ago by the Lannisters. The shadows circled, reaching toward him. "Go!" Ned shouted. "Leave me. I'll hold them." "No," Robb barked. "We came as wolves. We leave as wolves." Just as the shadows closed in, Ghost leapt into the darkness, teeth bared, howling. He tore through one shadow like it was made of silk, yelping as dark tendrils struck him. Jon screamed, "No!" Then from above, light poured through the ceiling, blinding white light, like sunlight through winter snow. The shadows hissed and vanished. Melisandre stood atop the balcony, red robes glowing in the blinding light. She held a flaming staff high, voice booming, "You may take the mother, but the sons will not burn." The shadows hissed again, this time retreating, not in fear but in strategy. The burning tree mark vanished from the walls, turning to dust. Lady Catelyn collapsed, unconscious. Still breathing, Ned looked up at the red woman. "Why help us now?" Melisandre's face was cold. "Because I've seen what happens if you lose." Outside Riverrun, the sky turned crimson. The trees wept red sap, and in the east, a new mark appeared on Dragonstone's cliffs, one no one had seen in generations, a crown of ash. Sitting atop a wolf's skull, the skies over Westeros were no longer skies. They had turned crimson grey, like the bruised flesh of a dying god. The sun, once golden and distant, now bled red across the land, hanging lower than it ever had. Crows no longer cawed. Trees stood like corpses. Rivers whispered, and everywhere, the burning tree vanished. In its place, a new mark now appeared, a crown of ash resting on a wolf's cracked skull. A warning, or perhaps a prophecy. At Riverrun, inside the broken halls where shadows once screamed, Lady Catelyn Stark lay breathing, pale and hollow. Her body remained untouched, but her soul was wounded, split in two by something dark that had tried to wear her like a mask. Maester Luwin and Melisandre both stood over her, arguing in tense whispers. "She's weak but alive," Luwin insisted. "We must let her rest. She was used as a vessel," Melisandre snapped. "That darkness left something behind. If it awakens again, you'll wish she had died." Ned stood close by, holding Catelyn's hand. His face looked older, his eyes sunken, tired. "If my wife dies," he said softly, "the council dies with her. This war ends with ashes." Robb leaned against the wall, blood crusted along his temple. "They want to break us from the inside. One wolf falls, the rest follow." Jon stood apart, staring out the broken window at the dying sun. "No, that's not what they want," Ned turned. "Then what?" Jon exhaled slowly. "They want us to burn each other." That night the final dream came, not just to Jon or Robb, but to all of them, even the lords who never left their halls. The maesters, the small folk, children in cribs, wives in beds, north or south, it didn't matter. The dream found them all. They stood in a field of snow and fire, and in the center stood the crown of ash and the wolf skull, A voice, cold, older than time, filled the air. There are too many wolves. The realm only survives if one is sacrificed. The wolf skull cracked open. The fire rose. The bloodline cannot continue. Choose the fire or lose the realm. Then silence. They awoke to chaos. Storm's End had fallen. The people didn't flee. They tore each other apart. Fathers killed sons. Mothers drowned their daughters. And at the heart of the keep, Robert Baratheon was found with a dagger in his chest, not stabbed but placed there. Sir Davos wept as he buried the old king. He died in silence, not a scream, not a fight, just let it happen. Above his grave they found the final mark burned into the stone, a wolf, crowned but chained. At Riverrun, the council held its final meeting. Jon, Robb, Ned, Melisandre, Luwin, and a few shaken lords sat around a circle of candlelight. No one spoke. Robb finally broke the silence. "We've lost. We just haven't fallen yet." "No," Jon said. "We haven't made the choice." "What choice?" Ned asked, even though he already knew. Melisandre answered. "One of you must burn." Luwin shook his head violently. "No. This is madness. This is shadow play, not prophecy." She cut him off. "You've all seen the dreams. This force, it doesn't just want death. It wants sacrifice. It wants meaningful blood. One of the wolves must burn, willingly." Ned looked between his sons. He didn't say a word, but his eyes did. That night, Jon disappeared. Ghost remained behind. Refusing to follow, Robb found Jon's note resting beside the sleeping direwolf. "Tell them I never wanted a crown. Tell them I came back from death once. Maybe it was so I could give it back this time. Burn me at the heart tree. And make it count." Jon Snow at the heart tree in the godswood of Winterfell, they built a pyre, old wood, salt-soaked stone, and one blade, Longclaw, laid atop the logs like a crown. Jon stood silent, wrapped in black, face calm. Ned couldn't meet his eyes. Robb could barely breathe. Melisandre lit the flame. It burned blue, then white, then gold, and for the first time in weeks the wind howled, not in fear, but like it remembered the name Stark. Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell, burned without a scream, and the skies began to clear. Days passed, the ash settled, the wolf skull vanished from every wall across the realm. The rivers flowed again. Birds returned. Children laughed. Crops began to grow. Peace, like a slow breath, began to settle over Westeros. Catelyn Stark awoke with a gasp and wept without knowing why. Robb was crowned Warden of the North, but refused the title King. Ned retired to the Vale with Catelyn, never lifting a sword again. Melisandre disappeared into the snows. Ghost walked alone across the wall, never seen again. But in the crypts of Winterfell, beneath the stone statues of old kings and broken brothers, the flame on Jon Snow's pyre never fully died. It flickered on cold nights, and some said, when the wind blew just right, it whispered, the wolf burned. But the realm was spared.